りおしまい。
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
and your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Dragon Ball as usual, in particular, episode 96, which is called Tails' Tale in English, or Say It Ain't So, Goku, Krillin's Great Strategy in the Japanese. Before we get started, though, if you like what you hear, please give us a like. Subscribe to our channel. We upload new episodes on Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble, so give us a subscribe over there. We'd appreciate it if you left a comment, whether you agree, disagree, if you had anything to add. We, particularly the last episode, we got a comment, so we appreciate our fans in doing so there. Anything else to add, Brock, before we get started?
No. I just wanted to echo that. We appreciate any engagement we can get with these ideas. You know, it really helps us because it's too easy to get caught up in sort of a single train of thought. So at any point, if someone thinks that something is relevant or detracts from an analysis, it would be really good to hear it just because I think it makes for a healthier conversation about the show. You know, I think that's what this is really about.
I agree. I agree strongly. Additionally, we are planning some big projects to work on during the summer, so this next year should be an increased output in our production. Hope you look forward to that. But before further ado, let's go ahead and get into episode 96, A Tail's Tale. So the first thing we see is Krillin rebuffs Goku's assault to the crowd's surprise. Bulma chastises Oolong for joking during the fight as Goku and Krillin square off. Krillin reminds Goku that he promised not to hold back. The Crane Hermit asks how long they're going to fight, all friendly-like. Goku then launches himself into the air and uses a Kamehameha to propel himself downward, delivering a powerful blow to Krillin and driving him to the edge of the ring. Tien recognizes him as an experienced fighter because of this maneuver. By the count of 6, Krillin has regained consciousness, calling Goku's assault a fun little attack. The Crane Hermit complains that he's tired of this fake fighting, and just then, the two launch into a series of attacks that are far more serious than before, surprising the Crane Hermit and the others in the crowd.
So this first section it's a continuation of what we saw before, but at an escalated level, right? So we see again that Krillin is reminding Goku what he had said before, where he says, "I won't forgive you if you won't fight me seriously." And so he's kind of taunting Goku here. He's saying, "I thought you were going to fight me seriously," because he knows that he's not really getting the full expression of Goku out of him.
But just before that, it's interesting to mention is that Bulma chastises Oolong for joking during the fight. And that's kind of what Krillin does to Goku is he
Yeah,
like stop joking around, right? Like
this
fight
is a
me
real
for real.
fight. Yeah, Bulma also treats Oolong poorly um for treating this like it's entertainment, right? Because this is entering the realm of what's serious. That Krillin is taking it seriously, and it needs to be escalated because Goku has been out in the world, right? This is expanded beyond the realm of the safe training underneath Master Roshi.
And so the first thing he really does is kind of an amazing innovation on the Kamehameha wave, right? He runs at him and uses the Kamehameha wave to propel himself from the air down at the ground towards Krillin, not as an offensive attack. Which it's interesting to say because this is the only person we ever see use the Kamehameha wave in this fashion. Most everybody else uses it to blast their opponent. Goku here uses it to propel himself forward. That being the logos power that he has, the ability to turn order from chaos is what propels the hero forward in space.
I would describe it as Goku having the enlightenment of the Logos at his back, propelling him forward, right? There's this, it's kind of similar to what we saw with the solar flare where Tien faces away from the light, but there's a certain manifestation of it that it's like the character is looking towards the sun and what they see is him standing there as an imposing figure of truth, right? And so there's this idea that Goku is attacking Krillin with the power of the logos propelling him. It's almost like the sun behind him, sort of projecting himself towards him as a force. Rather than sending it at him, he uses it to bolster himself towards him, saying, like, I have this power behind me, sort of pushing me forward at you, right?
Right, and what I'm meaning to say too is that only Goku is going to be able to harness this because that is what propels the hero forward, not necessarily what propels others. Like Tien wouldn't be able to do this, for example. And it shows the innovation of Goku's ability to manipulate the power of the logos, which is kind of how the Kamehameha wave is instantiated to be Goku's over time. We know that it's become a meme that Goku steals all of his techniques, but he really makes this his own throughout the uses that he has of it, especially compared to how Roshi's used it before. He's used it, sure, to save him from falling out of the ring, and he's also used it to blast the moon and blast a mountain. But it's not so much that he innovates on it as much as Goku does here, and as we see later on, Goku does as well.
And this is sort of how Goku would treat someone of ill repute, someone who is a real enemy of his, where he raises himself up and comes down at them in sort of a holy strike, right? Propelled by the strength of the truth, strikes them down. And that's what he does to Krillin is he hits him and he sends him flying and then he knees down on top of him and crushes him down into the ring, right? It's really an attack from above. And so Krillin reminding Goku, "Hey, you're going to need to fight me like I was a real serious threat or a real enemy of yours." And what's the enemy of Goku? I mean, Goku has been orienting himself more and more truthfully, more and more towards the good. So to call on that from Goku, Krillin gets struck down. He gets hit with smite from the paladin, right?
And so it's something that even impresses Tien, the ability he uses here. And I don't it's hard to say. I think it's a little more complicated than what we're saying here because now that I'm thinking about it more, um, the way that Goku manipulates the ability, the Kamehameha wave, exactly here, is it's more than having it at his back because it's what he's using and he's manipulating it as well.
It's like having the wind in your sails, right?
It's like putting the wind in your
Yeah.
sails,
It's kind
in
of what
your
I'm
own
trying to
sails.
That's what I'm trying to describe, right? It's
Yeah,
like appealing to a wind to carry you forward, right? And that
but not
wind
even
being the
appealing
truth.
to it, actually
Yeah,
controlling it.
manifesting it
Yeah,
and
manifesting
calling
it.
upon it in a sense to be the thing that guides you, or to be the thing that empowers you.
Right, and it also is a misdirection, which is Goku's ability to begin to integrate the deception that he's learned over the course of being in the real world, right? And so he runs at Krillin first and then jumps up in the air and does his holy smite, let's
The other
say.
thing is that he's calling it out before he even gets to him. And so it puts this anticipation on Krillin. He's running towards him, calling out a Kamehameha wave.
And he actually Krillin tries to punch him and then he jumps up and does it, right?
And this is sort of the difference because we'll see later in this episode. This is a more efficient use of the Kamehameha wave against Krillin than what Krillin could manifest.
Yes, we'll see later on.
Yeah.
But right, and Krillin though he does, to his credit, regain consciousness, right? And this is to say that his knowledge of the potential propellant to the hero and the hero itself being instantiated in Goku is not something that's going to uh, have Krillin exit the hierarchy. He understands that. He knows who Goku is. He understands how strong Goku is. So it's something that he can grasp, more or less. And so he's able to stay in the ring. He even gets up the count of 6. It doesn't take that long for him to get
Right.
back up.
And it's also a thing where this is an attack that Krillin would expect from Goku, right?
More or less, yeah.
And it's something that, as we're going to see, the idea of what this attack sort of represents is something that Krillin is integrated into himself anyway. But it's a good way to establish a power level, right? That Krillin is like, oh, I didn't expect you to do that. And then immediately after that, of course, we see that this isn't that serious for Krillin when the Crane Hermit says that he's tired of this fake fighting.
Hmm. And then they launch into their more serious fighting after that.
Right. And so there's now Goku hits Krillin with this, which really says where Goku is and how he would treat a serious fight. But it shows that Krillin, even though he hasn't been doing the same thing as Goku, which is, going out and training himself, he has applied himself and he sort of grappled with the strength of what it would mean to be an adversarial spirit. Whether or not he can fully grapple with that, we'll see. But it shows that the training that Master Roshi has given him hasn't really been for naught because he's at a pretty decent level.
Exactly. And one thing that I really want to mention before we move on, is the Kamehameha wave propelling Goku forward, because we're going to see this later. And I want to make clear my thoughts on it. So, in my opinion, the Kamehameha wave used here to propel him is that ability for him to distinguish and use his speech to create order in the world. And so here, whenever he's calling out the Kamehameha wave, right, he's creating order in the world by using this to instantiate himself in the hierarchy at the top, which the hero in an orderly system would rise to that position. It's only in a disorderly system or a tyrannical system that the hero is prevented from doing that. And so he's acting forward in that method to where he knocks Krillin that
So
way.
I think that what you're saying is that in this action, Goku is sort of acting as a test for Krillin as to whether or not he can deal with Tien.
Well, that's one thing of it, and it's kind of because we know that Goku here is using his techniques in, let's say, in its own hierarchy against Krillin. He's not using his best attacks first. He's kind of building up to it. And so here is one of those things that we'll see. And the reason I want to mention that is because he'll use it again. He'll use the magic words that create order by naming things and distinguishing things. We'll see that later, and it'll be important as well,
Right.
both in this arc and in the next one. But I think we're ready to move on there. So, After they squabble a bit. Krillin launches into a counterattack that quickly fails due to a chop to the neck from Goku. He yells counterattack and runs, and then Goku just chops him and is like,
Not
get out of
unlike
here.
how Jackie Chun did him the last year.
True, but Krillin doesn't like.
He's not completely
He scrambles
incapacitated to
away.
this.
Right, he scrambles away and tells Goku that this time he'd better be ready for real. Krillin begins to use the Kamehameha wave, but Goku warns him that the wave won't work against him. Ignoring his warning, Krillin launches the beam before dashing away, using the beam as a distraction. Surprising Goku, Krillin approaches from behind and grabs him by the tail. Goku collapses under his grip, and the announcer begins to count. So there's a couple things here. First of all, like we were saying, the counterattack, that's one part of it. The other part of it is the Krillin's maneuver. But let's go ahead and start there at the counterattack. So why does the counterattack fail?
So Krillin's response to this is that he tries to, and this is kind of the theme throughout the rest of the match. He tries to outspeed Goku. He doesn't really try to be stronger than Goku in this fight. Pretty much throughout. He understands that Goku is of a certain strength that it would be foolish for him to try to match. So he continually tries to beat Goku in speed. Um, and it's not until later in this episode that he really pushes his strength against Goku. Um, and so that's what we see here is that he tries to match Goku in speed. He tries to dash at him quickly, and Goku shows him immediately that that's just not going to work. That Goku has improved his speed far more than Krillin has.
And by speed, what we mean is the movement, the moving well through life that a person can adopt. Some people move so well and so quickly, let's say,
It's
that it's
the speed
unfathomable for other people to acknowledge.
the speed by which they integrate information to steer them onto the right path, right?
Goku's so far beyond Krillin in that method.
And we just saw in the last episode that that speed is something that caused Jackie Chun slash Roshi to step down because he saw the speed by which Tien was able to interpret new information and integrate it into his abilities. And so there is a challenge of that Krillin is trying to do here to show that he's learned the methodology. He's learned what it means to be Goku, even if he hasn't gone and acted it out right.
And so by doing that, he understands Goku's weakness, and so his next plan is exactly thus. He uses the Kamehameha wave as a distraction. So this would distract Goku. It's the use of the logos against Goku, which Goku has nothing that is in deceit, and so he can just stand there and do whatever, block it. But that's not the point of it.
Well,
Krillin,
there's a certain manipulation of the fact that he has to face it truthfully, right? He has to give it his attention.
he he does, he kind of does. I
It's
mean,
sort of
he
a
could.
compulsion to say like, hey, can like I'm speaking my truth, right? I say my truth as if that's a real thing, but I'm speaking truth to you, right? I'm trying to create an order out of the chaos and expressing it through the
See,
my
that's what I
ability
want to
through my
use. Yeah.
words, right?
Hmm.
And it's almost like Goku has a compulsion to confront that and to treat it truthfully, because it's like the honorable thing to do. And so Goku says, that's not going to work on me because I know how truthfully I'm oriented. But Krillin says,
And so by
regardless of that, you have to deal with the fact that I'm also good.
right, and but by doing that, it reveals that he's actually using unscrupulous methods to try and win by using Goku's weakness being his tail. And he is able to grab his tail, but it's worth mentioning here that it's a worthy strategy because it's an innovation on what what is being seen with the Kamehameha wave and Goku is that Goku's flaw here is shown. His confidence in the fact that Krillin wouldn't be able to get around him without him noticing, right? Because him recognizing um Krillin's Kamehameha wave is him kind of placating and playing with Krillin to begin with. And so he kind of gets that, And so, what does he do at the end of this set of clips but play along with Krillin's plan?
Right. And that's exactly what he launches into. I think that's a good segue to talk about the next part because Goku falls down face first onto the ring as the commercial break comes up, and it's like, oh, what's going to happen to Goku?
Right. And so, Bulma tells Krillin to let go of his tail, as it's not fair for Krillin to exploit this weakness. Chaozu remarks that the fight is now serious. Just before the count of 10, Goku launches himself upright before using his tail to fling Krillin into the ring. Goku reveals that over the years he's been working to toughen up his tail, following Roshi's orders. And not just Roshi, I want to mention Gohan here as
Gohan
well.
as well.
We're treated to a flashback in which Goku swings by his tail in a chain of monkeys. Roshi remarks that Goku no longer has any weaknesses. Just then, Krillin dashes in and elbows Goku directly in the face. Goku calls this attack dirty, and Krillin tells him there's no such thing as dirty in a match like this. Krillin then launches into an all-out attack, desperately driving Goku backward and delivering a powerful punch, knocking Goku to the ground. So first, let's get back to this play.
It is play for Goku at this point. And Krillin told him, if this is play, I don't respect you. Right.
Right.
So Krillin doesn't want Goku to play with him in this fight. And yet, here he is playing along with his attack on his weakness, letting him think, oh, he really got me.
Well,
And this angers Krillin, I think. He really
it
is.
does.
It provokes him.
He gets a little emotional from it too.
Yeah.
Even though there's a justification of why Goku did it in the first place, and it's because Krillin used deceitful means, let's say. Not only that, but the dirtiness of his attack afterwards shows Krillin's like his kind of resentment building towards Goku. And so I think I don't know if you have the clip, but like Bulma mentions in this episode, like, oh, things are getting serious now. Like,
Yeah.
I hope these boys will be friends afterwards.
Also, Puar starts praying at the beginning of the fight and says, I'm just praying that one of them doesn't get mauled.
Yeah. Because it's a passionate fight, right?
Yeah.
And so Goku plays along with this ploy because it's just what Krillin deserves, is to think that he won from doing
Well, it's an
that.
honorable attack, you know?
Yeah.
It's a respectable approach. And I feel like part of it is Goku judging that it should be respected, that it should be played along with.
Mm-hmm. And so then we get that flashback with Goku training his tail. And this is important because we see that both the spiritual and the earthly father of Goku have both told him to strengthen that which binds him towards his shadow and his, let's say, his deep ancestry. Because there's a difference between ancestry and like deep ancestry. We're going to have to distinguish that.
Yeah,
as we
well,
get further.
there's the fatherhood, right? And then there's sort of the individualness, sort of the ancestry that comes with being an individual. And
There's
tracing
like
it back to
ancestry, and then there's
beasthood.
like genetic memory.
Yeah.
It goes
Beasthood
so
is, I
deep.
guess, a way to sort of tie it in, right? Where it's like the propensity or the propensities that come from being a beast,
Beasthood.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Being an animal.
And so they train him to make that not something that weakens his waking self, let's say. And so and it's because as the spiritual father and the earthly father as such, they are able to point out the flaws of the hero whenever the hero journeys down into chaos to find that order which brings him and uplifts, let's say, all of society. And so Goku's whole mission with strengthening his tail was removing that propensity for him to fall into a beasthood or a bestial state. And we'll get more into that as we get further, because
Well, I think this is
once we get to Z, it's gonna reframe.
it is
a lot of
interesting.
this.
Vegeta reframes a lot of this too, but there's this. I want to point out that the relationship between shadow and ego has to do with this, right? Which is that if this isn't being integrated properly, you fall to an egotistical path. And that's the temptation that Goku would have to grapple with whenever he goes out into the world and creates a name for himself. And we saw his last fight where he was dealing with Pomput, right? And it's sort of Pomput is the idea of the name of a fighter. It's fame incarnate. He's the most famous, he's the most sought after. He woos Bulma just with his presence. And so then there's this aspect of it with Goku where he has to have the results of that integrated into himself. And so I've
Well,
I've always said that Krillin is almost like this tiny ego manifestation for Goku, right? A
let me
reflection of Roshi on him.
right, and let me be somewhat specific on the weakness of the tail here. So the reason the tail is the weakness of the hero is because the tail is that which undermines the hero, which in this case is the almost ancestral baggage that comes from existing in the world to begin with. All of our ancestry has done horrible things, and the whole idea of grabbing the tail is acknowledging that those things ha- being done undermine the idea of propelling the human spirit forward, which is what the heroic spirit does to begin with. And so the grasping of that is what weakens and undermines the hero, such that what Goku had to do was use not necessarily his ancestry, because he trains with monkeys to do it. He uses that genetic and biological means to strengthen his bond, not with those terrible acts, but instead strengthen his bond with the ability to handle that idea of terrible things happening in the world through his natural environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's it's mostly where you want to be explaining it. It's hard to put into words, but it also as a tale is something that sort of like trails behind someone, right? So symbolically whenever you see a tail, there's another element where it's visually something that is dragged behind somebody or it's the excess, right? And so as we've evolved as human beings, right, as homo sapiens, we have lost that excess and we've sort of become more focused. There's this idea of a tail being the thing that is your excess that you drag behind you, you know?
Well, and it ties human beings behind us in evolution metaphorically, right? Because
Right.
monkeys had tails.
Well, there's a human nature that needs to be grappled with for every living human, right? And part of it is a darkness. We deal with that in so many different mythological stories. We deal with it in Dark Souls, right? And sort of dealing with the idea of Manus or the pus of man. It's sort of what's hidden by the Dark Soul. There is an inevitable human nature that is an animalistic nature that we drag behind us.
But and what I want to say, I agree with you. The animalistic nature. That's what Goku squares with. He does not square with what we're going to talk about him squaring with in Z. That's way
Yeah.
bigger than what he squares with here. But what he squares with here is able to fulfill the necessary part of him not being undermined by the grasping of that knowledge in the tail.
Right, and he can use it as an extension of himself even because he's internalized it and sort of incorporated it into his being.
Yes. And so,
And,
that
and I think
last
it's good that Roshi points that out too because he says that it's something that's amazing about Goku is that he's so serious and docile. And so he's able to keep himself so centered that even the grasping of his negative aspects or his shadow is not something that stops him because he that's what he's been doing. He's been out in the world sort of grappling with all of himself. He's not under a master
I mean,
anymore. So
he had to map Tao's spirit onto him to beat him.
yeah,
So,
and they pointed out at the beginning of these fights, I think it was the fight before this, they were talking about they being the audience of Launch and Bulma and everyone talking about how he had already defeated the Red Ribbon Army
right,
and that was a
exactly.
real threat, right? And that's to show that he's incorporated sort of a beast within himself or the ability to grapple with the idea of really what it means to defeat an enemy and not just play, right?
Beyond play, right? Exactly. And so
And
they
Krillin
go
calls
beyond
out to
play
him in
here.
this fight, "Don't play with me."
Well, and I think he let's say articulates it best when he dashes Goku and elbows him in the face, in kind of a sucker punch attack, right? That's when it's really made clear that the stakes of the match are high and that Krillin is willing to do whatever it takes to win, which that puts it on another level to where it's no longer play. Krillin has set the parameters here, uh, because Goku's been racing the bar ever since, and his reaction to not being able to use Goku's tail as a weakness is to then fight with everything he has.
It's interesting because this is very similar to, we were just watching the YouTube creator clash, and in the very final fight, which was Dr. Mike versus iDubbbz, about halfway through the fight, when they tapped gloves, Dr. Mike followed the tap with an immediate punch to the face, tapped iDubbbz, and he got a lot of hate online for that. But I think that it showed that he wasn't playing with iDubbbz. There was sort of this attitude about it, and what a lot of people were excited about, which was that they were really boxing. And I think he did that to show that he was really boxing iDubbbz, that he wasn't just
Yeah.
like playing with him. He was giving iDubbbz a fair fight. And I think that's kind of what Krillin's doing here is he's saying, okay, like you can escalate the stakes of this fight. I'll do it the best of my ability to. Like I'm not just playing with you.
Hmm.
He's trying to show to Goku, like, don't play with me. I'm not playing with you. I'm trying to win this fight. I'm not trying to make a show out of this.
And so, in a volley of attacks, he actually gets the best of Goku and knocks him to the ground. And so, Krillin, for a shining moment, seems to be on top of things. He's tried his best. He's used the things that he knows. He's used his knowledge. Like no discredit to Krillin for trying to use the weakness in the tail. It's only that Goku had integrated that part of himself that it was an ineffective attack. And so the last thing we see is that Goku stands back up and then disappears.
Well, I do want to point
Whoa.
out
Oh,
before we move on though, the desperation of Krillin's attack, right?
sure.
Because there's a sequence here where he just rushes him and he's forcing him backwards and he's crying out. Like he sort of makes a mock cry. He's like, ah, and then he runs towards Goku and he starts punching him. And we see this shot of his face where he's just desperately swinging wildly. And he hits Goku this one time and it knocks Goku sprawling. And he has this moment where he looks back and forth between his fist and Goku over and over because he just
Yeah.
can't believe that he's been able to knock Goku down. And I think that's a big moment for Krillin because I don't think he went into this fight thinking that he could beat Goku even.
Or even knock him to the ground, let's say.
But he but realizing that it would be the noble thing and the honorable thing and honestly the best way for him to train to fight whatever Goku had integrated over this time.
Yeah, I think it's true. Um, the desperation as well, I think, is because Krillin, studying under the ancestral spirit of, or let's say the spiritual father of Roshi, isn't able necessarily to integrate as fluidly as Goku, and so he's kind of run out of options at this point. Um, like you said earlier, he doesn't really try to measure up to Goku's strength one on one because he knows that he can't do it. But now he doesn't have any more options. The tail's not going to work, right? He already tried to use the he already tried to attack him just regularly, and that didn't work. And so now we see him launching an all-out attack, and like right here, where you're talking about, where he like has his eyes shut and he's just like punching wildly, right? And Goku's a little caught off guard by the emotions that Krillin is expressing in the fight. I think that's kind of made clear with the animation, and it's what allows Goku to get punched, and that desperation shocks Goku. And why would it shock Goku? But that Krillin's own identity and self is kind of in the balance with this fight because he's Goku's best friend. He's trained with Goku from the beginning. He should be at least comparable to Goku in strength. And so the idea that Goku's so far ahead of him is does make him desperate, and is somewhat frustrating for Krillin because he's given it his all, and that's where the tears come in, and then Goku's a little shocked by that because his training is nothing like that.
So yeah, there's a sequence here also that brings out the response from Roshi. So before he had said that that was one of Goku's strengths was that Goku was so docile and serious. But here, as Goku is driven backwards by Krillin's emotion, he says it also could be his weakness that he's too docile and serious.
Hmm.
And that's really the point here is that Krillin wants it more.
Yeah, Krillin wants it more. Yeah,
Krillin, this is one of those cases where it's like he's got more heart and more spirit driving him towards this fight than Goku has in him.
this particular fight, the
Yeah.
next fight, we'll see.
But specifically here, it's sort of a
Mhm.
it's a serious fight. But Krillin to Krillin, this is
Well, it's Krillin has something to
it's a
prove.
question almost to say, are you going to be the protagonist of your story, or are you going to continue following in Goku's footsteps?
Right.
And so this is a real question for Krillin, especially, I've kind of talked about him being more of an ego projection or an egoistic character, but this is an identity crisis for Krillin here, where, as we'll see in the next few episodes, he's learning that he has to be able to expand his view,
And be able to be open to the world. Yeah.
but that he wants it,
Yeah.
that he wants to believe that he's on the right path to do that. And so this is sort of the proof is in the pudding for Krillin here as he faces against Goku, and just how much he wants to be able to progress in the same way.
And so all of that leads him to his kind of peak in the match where he does knock Goku to the ground. And as Goku gets back up, he disappears, moving too quickly to be seen. Krillin looks around, unable to find Goku as he dashes around the arena. Goku appears in front of Krillin, surprising him and suddenly launching him out of the ring. The audience complains that it was a disappointing ending, but Tien says the truth that Goku had actually delivered 8 hand chops and a kick to defeat Krillin in that time. This surprises both Roshi and the Crane Hermit. After the match, Bulma launched Cheer the Boys On before the final match, Goku versus Tien. And so here we see the moving too fast to be seen. This is an exploitation of Krillin's ability to not open himself up to the world. He's not able to see all the way around his head. He doesn't have an enlightened vision like someone will see very soon. But Goku knows that, and he moves so fast. Let's say he moves well and he moves beyond the comprehension of Krillin to be able to first startle him to make him off guard, and then attack him and knock him out of the ring. Uh,
And it's only Tien that can
meaning
see this.
it is meaning that what Goku does here is by moving so fast and being so incomprehensible to Krillin, that's what removes Krillin from the hierarchy. He is unable to comprehend the depths and the not the depths, the speed at which the hierarchy is demanding those move within it. And so Krillin can no longer be part of the hierarchy and gets knocked off.
It's also the speed by which Goku has learned to integrate the unknown, right? Because Goku's been out in the world encountering these lessons, but as we've seen, Krillin has stayed under the tutelage of the Crane Hermit. And so we're seeing the two approaches compared against each other here, where it's like, which one of those ways is going to improve you more? So it's kind of telling the viewer, look, at the end of the day,
Look.
here's the difference.
Well,
The
right.
actual scaling between the two is
But
monumental.
kind of all speed in Dragon Ball is the ability to be incomprehensible to an opponent, meaning the mode by which you are doesn't make isn't able to be figured out by the person that you're fighting. So here, for example, Goku's ability to move so fast comes from his openness and his integration of chaos into order in the world that he's experienced on his travels in the road. That's where the speed comes from. And that mode of being open to the world, but able to withstand the hardships of life, is incomprehensible to Krillin because he's always had a guardian. He's always had Launch around ever since we've known Krillin. And so that whole protective system and the orderly system he's come to know as part of his master's training, Roshi, has prevented him from being able to move at that pace of maturity.
Yeah, and this is also Goku's response to Krillin's attempt to do the same thing, to move faster than Goku could expect.
Right, because Krillin does it when Goku's off guard, and Goku makes sure that Krillin's on guard before he does anything.
Right, he says, "Okay, you're ready. Now I'm going to show you."
Yeah.
And delivers an attack that's faster than Krillin can respond to it.
Yeah,
And
faster
of
than
course,
any
it's
Senior.
Tien that recognizes the sequence of attacks, I should say, because Tien was the one that we saw who was out in the world
As well.
as
Right,
well as
exactly. He
Goku
has
and
the enlightenment so he can
integrating
see.
the chaos of the real unknown and also instantiating himself in sort of a different level of hierarchy. And so Goku is saying, "Okay, here's the final test, Krillin. Are
Mhm.
you able to move on this level?" And Krillin can't comprehend how it would be meaningful and what it would mean to him.
Because, like I said, to be able to move that fast, it has to be you have to free yourself from the, let's say, any tyranny of order. So like Roshi's training, launches, all that schedule, all that stuff needs to be gone for you to be walking in the path between chaos and order.
Right, you have to find that balance, that zone of proximal development.
Yeah. And so, by doing this, Goku surprises both Roshi and Shen. Um, they can't really. They understand now, kind of, the stakes at which Goku and Tien's match will be, and after that match, like we said, they cheer on. The crowd cheers on the contestants for Goku versus Tien, and that'll happen next time.
Well, specifically, Bulma and Launch are being very nice to Goku and Krillin. Krillin says, "Oh well, I didn't move very well. I got
I
trounced."
didn't move well, yeah.
And of course, Bulma and Launch both tell him, "No, you were great. You actually did you fought well." And that's the first sort of instantiation we see of that. It'll come up in the next episode
It
as
will, yeah.
um, Launch and Bulma are being much more friendly to Krillin now that he has sort of expressed himself in that way and confronted
Well, he
this
started to
challenge,
take on some more,
responsibility.
yeah, and some more masculine traits that would make him more appealing to women to begin with.
And we see that specifically acted out here. I think that Toriyama did it very intentionally here to make a point.
Maybe not intentionally, but he definitely did it.
It definitely happened.
It happened. Here it is.
And so Krillin immediately notices that they're treating him differently after he did this.
Yeah.
It's the fact that Roshi and the Crane Hermit both are surprised by this is that ultimately Goku has transcended that level of schooling. They're both archetypally teachers, and Goku has reached a point where he's above whatever a teacher would represent for him because he stepped into the world and encountered something beyond hypothetical. And so he surprises both of them because at the end of the day, this is something that really the Crane Hermit only knows as much as Tien has been able to do this as well. And so it kind of gives us a hint that Goku is on a level that at least could be what the Crane Hermit expects from a lower representation of Tien, right? That they both have done something that's on a level above what the tournament has represented so far, which is we both know for both of them is gone out into the world and made themselves manifest beyond the hypothetical, that they're real now, and this is a real fight.
And that the fight itself will transcend the hierarchy. That's kind of already instantiated, as we can tell.
Right, I think that's a good foreshadowing for what Tien's gonna do with the
And
hierarchy,
that's
right?
a good thing, yeah, to say. And another little bit of foreshadowing that I want to mention is that Roshi says that after he sees Goku fight, he feels that he's less and less needed in the
Yeah, he's
world.
feeling like he's not needed
And
anymore.
oh boy, will that come back in a couple of episodes.
Very quickly.
So I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up.
Yeah, we're getting really close to the point where the series starts to get serious.
We'll actually start. Well, the real Dragon Ball starts here. So if you liked what you heard, please give us a like. Subscribe to our channel. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays, on Rumble Tuesdays and Fridays. We'd love to hear what you had to say in the comments. I think that's pretty much yeah. I'm your
Alright.
host on the left owl,
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
and we hope you guys have a good night.